Okay, so I am Sandy Reese. I actually live in Portland, Oregon, and I've been working for the APS Employment Center now for many years. I originally, though, worked for a very large, comprehensive public mental health agency for 27 years that implemented IPS back in 2000. And people the last session heard my story, so I won't tell it again. But all I got to say is what I found with IPS is it changed people's lives, that jobs, real jobs in the community made such a difference in people's lives that it became like a focus of mine to get it going. Mental health is kind of behind in a lot of ways when it came to this because supported employment started more within the DD population. So we didn't get into it until later on, where it was actually like employment's good for people with mental health conditions. Anyway, what we're going to talk about today is this three-step approach we use in IPS to help people get jobs. And I want to know if anybody here has done job development. Raise your hand if you've done job development. Okay. So yeah, maybe 5 or 6 people or so. Yeah. So you know what that feels like to go out and meet employers face to face. And that it's often kind of a little bit intimidating for people if you haven't done it in the past. I found it very intimidating initially. So here's a poll question for you all. Because this is kind of like, with the three-step approach, it kind of changed things from the way we typically, traditionally thought about doing job development. So the question is, a good strategy for job development is to, number 1, visit employers to ask about openings. Number 2, visit employers to present information on the IPS supported employment program, or whatever your employment program is. Number 3, visit employers to learn about their business. So what do you think it is? 1, 2, or 3?
3. All of the above.
Anybody else? So that's the 3.
3.
Got a 3? Yeah, it's 3. So we're going to talk more about it, right? We're going to talk about more about why is it a 3 and not a 1 or a 2. And this is kind of what shifted things for us. Go ahead, Patrick. So I'm going to tell you about, this is just an analogy we use for this three-step approach. And it's called the 3 Cups of Tea. And it's a book that's out, written by a man named Greg Mortensen. It's a real book that exists. He got in a little bit of trouble for embellishing his story, but it's really, for the most part, true. He is an individual that was a mountaineer, and he is climbing K2, second highest mountain in the world. He gets separated from the rest of his group and ends up in this village, extremely remote village that nobody wanders into. And so he's there until they take care of him, nurse him back to health. And as it goes to leave, and this is a very primitive village, you know, no indoor plumbing, no heating. When he goes to leave, he says, "How can I ever repay you?" And they said, "We want a school. We want a building, a school for our children to go to." And he's so taken by that. It's like, he's just like, wow, of all the things they could ask for, they're thinking about their kids and their education. So he returns to the United States, bound and determined to raise money, and he really did. I mean, he did this in a number of different countries, Afghanistan being one of them for girls. But he raised enough money to return. And the largest city he can go to that's by this village is Pakistan. So he's visiting with employers, and he has an interpreter with him. And when he goes in to visit with an employer, the first time he walks into a business, owners always offer a cup of tea. It's just customary. But then he says, he looks at him, and they look at him kind of like suspicious, like, Now, if you've done job development, you kind of know this feeling. It's kind of like, they'll look at you like, what are you here to sell me? What do you want? They're suspicious, right? You're a stranger, and they're suspicious. And so he would kind of give a bit of a spiel about what he was doing, and the employer would just be kind of like, I'm not so sure. Who are you? And so the interpreter was the one that said, come on, Greg, let's leave. We'll come back again. So they wait a few days, and then they go back to the business again. And they go in, and the employer this time offers a second cup of tea, but he kind of looks at him like, I didn't expect you to come back. So the employer is kind of curious now. You know, here he shows back up again, didn't expect him to do that. So he's a little bit warmer, you know, this time around. The employer is kind of like trying to help him think about some things, and they're kind of working a little bit together, but he's still not fully, you know, he's moving prices up, and he's not fully on board. You can tell he's not. and the interpreter says, come on, Greg, let's leave and let's come back again. So the third time they come back, now the employer offers a cup of tea and says, he's not going away. He's persistent, he's not going away. Let's sit down and start talking. And so at that point, they sit down and start thinking, how can we work together? And so that's just an analogy to thinking about when you first visit employers and kind of that feeling. You're a stranger when you walk in. You can't ask for favors. You know, and so it's all about learning about the business and what they do. So you want to do that because, you know, you want to learn about the culture of the business. You'll hear a lot about that. You know, it's not just the task and the skills, but it's also what does it feel like when you're there? Sometimes people will say we're a family company. That gives you a feeling for it. Some are going to be huge corporations. You know, you just get a different feel. But you want to understand all of these things. Okay, so I already said that. Got ahead of myself. So here's a value statement. And this is somebody asked me in the morning session, and she said, do you go in saying this is a good thing to do? You know, in hiring people, do you go in with an approach like it's charitable? You're doing the right thing for the community. You're doing the right thing in hiring this person. And we would say absolutely not to do that, right? And so why? What is it in for the employer? I mean, why do they want to hire people we work with?
To get a good employee.
Right, to get a good employee. But then we have to make sure they're getting a good employee, right? Because if you do that based on charity, and I've run into it before, and the person isn't a great match or they're not a great employee, but they did it because it was the right thing to do, then sometimes they're like, I have this person, I don't need anybody else, right? So you don't want to have people actually say that to me. So we want a good employee. We want to make sure we're giving them a good employee. They're running a business. Most people run a business. Most people that run a business care to make a profit. So we need to make sure that we're taking care of them and the people we work with, that it's mutual. Okay. So here are some of the things we could say. This is a value statement. So when we're thinking about this, we could say, I'm not looking for a job for anyone today because we don't care, really. I mean, and this is hard for people because it's kind of like, slow down. Don't think about, I got to get somebody in a job today. I want to learn about the business. I want to learn about what they do. So I don't care if they have an opening. And that throws them. Every time if somebody says, I'm not looking necessarily for a job today, employers will be like, what are you looking for then? But it's part of the learning is to learn about employers and the types of candidates they would like to meet in the future. So I'm looking, find out what you do here, the sort of person that's successful here, in order that if I do have somebody that matches that, I can refer them to you. I help people who want to work find jobs that are the right match for their skills and personality. I'd love to meet with you for 20 minutes in the next week or so to learn about who would be the right match for your business. I want to be sure that I only refer job seekers to your business if they are the type of workers you want to meet. So this is like when we're thinking about the very first, when I go in for that first cup of tea, these are the things I'm saying. And what I want to do is request an appointment to come back and learn about the business. So I'm not going to say, I want you to stop working and doing whatever you're doing right now and talk to me. What I want to say is let's schedule time for me to come back when you have time, when it's convenient for you, in order to learn about the business. Does that make sense so far? Do people have thoughts about this? So in other words, we're not talking to them about what we do at this point, right? We're not trying to sell them on what we do. We're slowing down the process. We're not looking to get somebody in a job quickly. Although with IPS we have rapid job search. You'll hear a lot about that. So we're going to start the job search, but we're not going to move people too quickly. And then the third bullet is, if you are like most employers, you have learned about the types of person who's a good fit for your business. I want to know about the skills and personal characteristics of good employees at your business so that I can refer that type of person who will be a successful employee for you. So that's what we want to talk to employers about. That's what we're trying to do. Any thoughts about those statements? Is this how you're currently doing it? You people that are doing job development?
I've
Yes.
done job development in the past. I don't do it now, but usually what I do is I frequent the business
Uh-huh.
a lot
As a customer?
as a customer.
Yeah.
Introduce myself around, talk to people who might be on the floor,
Yeah.
and then after they get to know me, then I approach them. It's usually the way I do it.
Yeah. So again, it's like you're a stranger initially, and so you kind of build this relationship with them, so they get to know you, and then they're more comfortable talking to you. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
I just didn't know where to start with this. Because I just started as an employment specialist, and for me, I just made a list of businesses I was interested in.
Yeah.
I thought that would be a good fit. But then the next step was like, okay, if I show up, like, what do I tell them? Where do I start? So this is a good starting point.
Okay.
Me, so,
Yeah, it's like, now what?
yeah.
Yeah. And when we do this training as part of the IPS Employment Center, so we go in for the morning and we would just like talk about this, but practice, like write your job introduction statement. You don't have to stick it exactly to it. You don't want it to sound like it's so scripted, but you need to have an idea in your head what you're going to say. And then we practice asking questions. So we spend the whole morning on didactics, and we'll show you a video. And then in the afternoon, we go out together. So I just did that last week. Then we all go out together to do job development. And I always say, I'll go first to demonstrate there's no magic behind what I do. You never know what an employer is going to say or do. You just don't, So I do that because people are so afraid of taking a risk. They're so afraid of putting themselves out there that they'll be rejected by the employer. And it's just kind of like, and it doesn't happen that often to me. But when it does now, it's kind of like it is what it is, I mean, sometimes you can like turn things around, which is amazing when that happens, when you kind of turn, you have questions you ask that it's kind of like, I really want to learn about you. They just open up.
Do you just show up or do you call in?
We typically show up for cold calls. I mean, sometimes you would phone, but we just find that, and the thing with IPS, getting back to that, is so much of it's face-to-face contact. We just really believe that relationships are better built face-to-face than by phone or Zoom. But if I went in, I would ask for a hiring manager, and I would say, so this is kind of the script. So I would say, may I speak to a hiring manager? So when I got in front of them, I'd say, hi, my name is Sandy Reese, and I work for LifeWorks Northwest. I'm an employment specialist, and I help people that are currently out of work to obtain jobs. But a very important part of my job is to learn about businesses and the sort of person that's successful here. So if I ever had anybody that matched that, I could refer them to you. But what I'd like to know right now is, would you be willing to schedule a 20-minute appointment with me at your convenience so I can come back and learn about what you do here at Home Depot and the sort of person that's successful? So sometimes people will say, great, I have 20 minutes next week, and they give me a time. Other times they're like, I have time right now. I had a lot of that last week where people just said, I have time right now. It's really slow, so let's sit down and talk. And it's absolutely fascinating what you learn. I mean, I love doing it because you never know what's going to be out behind the door when you go in. Yeah.
So at what point do you disclose that these are individuals with disabilities?
Well, they may ask, but I wouldn't start off with it. I just don't. And I leave a brochure. I could leave a brochure about my program, a business card. I suggest that people don't hide where they work. So, if the name of your company's LifeWorks Northwest Behavioral Health, I would say that in my sentence, so I'm not trying to hide it from them. Usually around the end of the second or third meeting, they'll ask more. You say, do you have any questions for me? And you can talk more about who you are and what you do. But as soon as we do that, it diverts the whole conversation onto us instead of them. And so we're trying to stick with them, keep the focus on them. And if they ask, I may make it very short. I work with people that have mental health conditions. Some people experience some anxiety. Somebody else may have some depression. But what I can tell you is they all have in common is that they have a strong desire to work. And working is a part of the recovery. So, and then move it.
Worker.
Right, right, exactly. Yep. Yes.
Have you ever had an employer say to you, or do you have a response when they say this? To look online at
Yes.
all the traits of what they're looking for
Yep.
is listed.
All the time. All the time. It's like you can apply online. And typically, sometimes what I'll do is have people apply first, so I can say, oh, we've already done that. But I'll often just say, I do understand that, we're willing to do it, but I'm trying to learn about your business and what you're looking for. And a lot of those things I don't know without talking to you. And once I find that out, if they still are eligible and it meets what you're looking for, we'll come in and apply. But otherwise, it's kind of a waste of time. I mean, if I have somebody and it doesn't match what you look for, we wouldn't apply for a job. I wouldn't have them apply here. So I just kind of put it more on the match. It's on the match. And often they'll say it's all online, but it's just not. There's so many things that you can't get online. I went out with somebody and they had somebody that wanted to work at a paint store, mixing paints. And so we got all this information because they had time to talk to us. And it's not an easy job. But anyway, we got a lot of information. We walked out, and the woman I was with said, I could never work there. And I said, why? And she said, the fumes. She said, I have a terrible headache. The fumes are terrible. And I thought, how would I know that if I looked online? So you don't get it unless you go. Okay. So this is an example. So you can take an example of what we would suggest you say. So this is an introduction statement to help you. So again, it'd be whatever your name is. You want to have the 4 key components here: who you are, where you work, what you do, and the purpose of the visit.
And for those that are taking photos, I can grab emails afterwards. I'm happy to send you the PowerPoint so you don't feel like you have to take photos.
That'd be great.
Yeah, after we're done, I'll help.
Okay, go ahead. And I think we have a second example maybe. Yeah, so here's another one that we'll send. So it just changes it up a little bit. And it's interesting to me because whenever I do this training, I say, okay, we're going to write our introduction statement and practice. People say, I don't need to do it. I already know it. But they don't. Most people just get very tongue-tied. So it's really good to just kind of have something in your head, the 4 steps. And you can shift it around. But it's really good to kind of practice and know what you're going to say. So we don't have to do that. We won't have people write your introduction. So the second step of this is the good question to ask when you return. Because now you're going back. You've got that appointment. You have a 20-minute appointment to go back and learn about the business. So do you have questions you really like asking employers? Anybody when you do job development?
Everyone's focused on the salary, pay.
Yeah.
What's the expected salary?
I'd like to know what the business struggles getting done efficiently. Like what are some of your biggest challenges with your current workforce?
Yeah.
Because it's an open-ended question that allows them to start talking about things that might be difficult.
Yeah.
And it can create an opportunity for you to find out something that you could really add value, which would in turn get them more engaged and interested in speaking.
Yep. That's a good one. It's like, what is your biggest hiring headache?
Yeah.
Or what have you found most challenging, positions most challenging? I don't usually start off with asking money. I would probably do that a little bit later, but right now it's kind of like I want to really learn about like what you do, what you value. It's you, not me, to learn about it. At some point you're going to want to know it, right? But initially it's like keep the focus on them. Anything else?
I might ask what their mission, vision, and core values are.
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, and sometimes you can look that up. It's kind of like, a lot of hotels, Hilton Hotel always has, we have a customer, I don't promise, that every customer will be happy no matter what. I can't remember it now. I used to have it in my head, but it was like, every detail should be taken care of. So I might say, how do you go about doing that? So I might repeat it back to them and say, how do you go about doing that as a business? How do you make sure that every customer is satisfied and happy? Anybody else?
How do you feel about looking up the business in Glassdoor? Because
Yeah.
it tells you about former employees and see how the turnaround is sometimes.
Yeah.
Do your own research.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with doing research, right? I think that's a good thing to do is research beforehand. So we'll go ahead. Now, here are some questions we'd ask. Here are some things you might ask. Why do you like working for this business? So you're asking, these are employer-focused questions. What do you like about working here? What are the goals for your business? So these are focused on the business itself. What sets your company apart from others? You know, what are you most proud of here? Go ahead, Josh. These are questions that are good to learn about the employer's needs. So I like these ones. I like ones about characteristics of people they hire. What type of person tends to be successful here? I had one employment specialist I was shadowing, and she said it was a pharmacy job. And she asked him how long he'd worked there, and it was like 30 years. And she said, so in your 30 years, can you describe an employee that really stands out in your mind, that you remember? So he described this person. It was just like perfect. What qualities do you look for when you're interviewing a job candidate? Because sometimes, you know, it's hard to tell. Please describe your workforce. So these are about employers' needs. I see that you have blank positions. What other positions you have that I might not know about? That's gotten me in the door a lot. When they're kind of like, when I go in and do my initial introduction, they're kind of like, look at me kind of suspicious. And I'll say, I just want to know things like I can see that you have people working the sales floor, you have people in cashiering, but you probably have a lot of jobs that I can't see. So I don't know what those are, and I'm interested in finding out about it. And they're kind of like, oh, if that's all you want to know. So they'll keep talking to you. What is a typical day like here? It's good to know. Here's more about employers' needs. What is your hiring process? So I had somebody at Homewood Suites. I think that's Marriott, right? And I asked him this question, and he said, I have 3 screening questions when people come in to apply. And he said, do you want to hear one of them? And I said, sure. And he said, what do you think is more important, to be trustworthy or to be reliable?
Trustworthy?
That's where my head was. Yeah. I'm thinking in my head, trustworthy. I didn't say anything. I just stared at him like, oh my God. And finally he said, no, it's reliable. I didn't say it though. He says, it's reliable because if you're trustworthy, if you're reliable, I'll learn to trust you. But I think it can go either way. I think that's kind of a goofy question, to tell the truth. But I mean, they'll have all kinds of things like pretend you're something on the shelf in a store. What product are you and how would you sell yourself? I mean, you get really interesting. It's like, oh my gosh, I'd probably just flub out. I don't know I could answer it. So people should start with an online application. So this is kind of the online sort of thing. So people should start with an online application. But you mentioned that you need people who are self-starters with outgoing personalities. If you had a friend who matched that description, how would you advise your friend to go about applying for work here? So when they say that, it's kind of like, I can't tell you how often, you know, I'll say something like, I understand that, but this is something you told me. And if you had a friend, you know, or a relative that really wanted to work here, how would you tell them? How would you suggest they go about getting a job here? And they're kind of like, well, in that case, I can recommend them. You know. So these are ineffective questions. These are questions we don't want to ask. And this is hard because a lot of times people want to go to this. Are you hiring? That's a yes or no. So if they say, no, we're not hiring, then it's kind of like, okay, we're done. Right? But they will be. At some point, they're going to be hiring. So you want to learn about the business regardless. Do you anticipate job openings in the future? Just kind of stay away from the whole thing about that. Just learn about the business. Do you hire people that have substance use disorders? You know, people get into, and it's also, do we have legal histories?
Do you hire people with criminal history?
Yeah. It's kind of the same sort of thing. And it's just kind of like, typically not everybody on a caseload is working with people with substance use or criminal histories. And so we don't want to just, that's not everybody we work with. And typically I can ask a question like, do you have any exclusionary criteria for people who are applying? Or when I ask like, what is your hiring process? They'll say we do background checks, we do drug tests. So it just doesn't need to be asked. And once you get to know the employer and you start working with them, if somebody has a legal history, then you have a relationship. So then you can advocate on behalf of them. But starting off with this as the first statement is not a place to go. Are you laying off? That's kind of Businesses don't want to talk about that. So again, the focus is to listen and try to understand the workplace from the employer's point of view. Be curious, ask open-ended questions, use reflections. You'll know that the interview is going well if the employer is doing most of the talking. And we say a rule of thumb is 70% of the time the employer should be doing the talking, because then we're finding out about the business. Okay, we're going to go to the video. So this is Galen, and he's at his second appointment, and he's asking questions. I think it has subtitles too, I hope.
This module is about
Oh,
child development.
so can we move it
In
up
the
a
first
bit?
demonstration,
Sorry.
we
So I'll tell you when.
Mhm.
Blah, 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 blah. Keep going. Oh, back up a bit. Little tiny. Oh, okay. That's about it. That's good. Thank you. Perfect.
Chair.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Before we get started, I just want to mention I haven't had a chance to take a look at the brochure. It's just been hectic around here this week. So I might have some questions about the service you offer.
Absolutely. I know you're busy. Last week I indicated that the purpose of my call today was to learn a little more about your business and find out about some of the positions that you hire for. Should only take about 20 minutes. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Matt, I understand that you're the general manager of your dealership.
That's correct.
That is correct, okay. So could you describe your hiring process at your dealership here?
Well, you know, we have 3 managers underneath me in parts, service, and sales, and those people largely take care of the hiring in their divisions. We do talk about it at a weekly meeting and make decisions on higher level positions, but the lower level positions are largely hired by these individuals.
All right, so they keep you informed of their hiring decisions that they make
Sure.
for those positions?
Sure.
Okay, great. Well, that's a good segue. Maybe we could talk just a little bit about some of the positions that you do hire for. And obviously, I know you hire salespeople for the floor, and you have office support staff and mechanics, technicians, body shop technicians, etc. Are the positions here at the dealership that I would be less aware of?
Sure, we have the need for people who wash cars, for service customers, who detail cars, and who also prepare cars for delivery. We get about 4 deliveries a day to customers. Those cars, and you know, the shrink wrap plastic has to come off, and they have to be washed, gassed, and there's a checklist of some tasks that have to be done. It's not technical, but it does take a couple hours to do that. We also hire people to shuttle customers to work and bring them back at the end of the day after their car has been serviced. And there is a need also for some custodial positions, maintaining the showroom, dusting off cars that have been in snow, and those kinds of things, general maintenance.
So I'm hearing about 5 or 6 different kinds of general skills-based kinds of positions that you described there.
Yeah, these are largely part-time. I would say, 10 to 20 hours a week, and it may vary by week.
All right, well, that's great. How's it been for you trying to get people for those kinds of positions?
Generally, it's been a high turnover position. There have been people who've moved up the line, but generally these people don't stay that long. They get a full-time job somewhere else, or they're not satisfied. And we would like to bring in a workforce of people who would stay and be with us in a reliable manner.
That might be an area that I could, and my company could be of help to you. Many of the folks that we work with oftentimes are looking for part-time work. They don't necessarily want full-time work. That's because some of these folks have other sources of income. For example, they're receiving some Social Security disability income. So they're quite satisfied with part-time work.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think brings up a topic that I talked to some of the managers with about the disability, especially the mental illness kind of component to it, because we've, while we're receptive to having a whole variety of people work here, we've never really employed anybody with a mental illness and don't know the impact on coworkers, customers, or really what to expect. While we know something about mental illness, we don't know it in a real sense working at the dealership.
Is there anything real specific you'd like to know about that?
Yeah, we're concerned, we're concerned about the impact on our customers. We're running this show to make money and to be good, sell cars and provide service. And we've got to make sure that a worker doesn't detract from that.
It sounds like to me you want to know if they're going to interact in a way that's satisfactory to both your customers and to your employees. And maybe the best way to address that in some sense would be first, of course, just to meet the people through an interview process to get an idea of who they are.
Yeah, we would do that.
You know, sure. I really don't think that you're going to see a problem. I mean, these are folks that you meet every day on the street in your working life. And one other thing that I'd like to offer you the opportunity to do would be to maybe perhaps, I obviously work with employers throughout the community, some of those folks that you might already know. And I would invite you and hook you up with some of those employers, and you could gain some firsthand knowledge about their experience of what it's like to work with not only the folks that I placed with them, myself and my agency that I
Sure,
represent.
that would be really fine. I mean, another thing that comes up is, you know, this person, whoever it might be, do we need to do anything to accommodate this person? You know, make that person comfortable here? Do we have, you know, I'm concerned about what we need to do to make this a success.
Well, you know, to tell you the truth, Matt, I really don't think so. I can't answer that specifically because I don't know exactly what the job duties might be. I normally don't even approach an employer on a second meeting about a potential position, but the timing here seems pretty good on this, and I do have an individual that I think would be a good job match for the kinds of work that you described. Would you like to hear a little bit about this individual?
Sure.
This is a gentleman who's about 35 years old. He hasn't worked in a while, but he does have some pretty good background. He's done some construction work, so he's mechanically oriented. He likes to work with his hands. He likes to work outside. He doesn't want to particularly be too involved with working with the public per se. He's pretty self-directed, and he's extremely motivated. He does have a driver's license, so he could certainly do some shuttle work and driving cars if you needed that. Only wants 10, 15 hours of work at most, although we hope that he might aspire to more than that at some point.
So you're involved in this thing once we hire somebody. I'm not clear about the role of employment. You call yourself employment specialist. Is that it?
Yeah, that is correct.
So you're involved after the person is hired in some way.
Absolutely. Our approach is to come in and build relationships with employers and to advocate and provide effective information to the employer to make a good hiring decision. If an individual needs some help in moving through their tasks and responsibilities until he knew them well enough to perform them on his own, so that it's we provide ongoing support, work closely with his supervisor, and my commitment is to make the most successful employee for you as possible. And that goes on for as long as that individual and yourself needs or wants it, yeah.
Sounds reasonable to us. We'd be willing to, take it a step further and see what it would look like.
Well, that would be fabulous. Do you think that we could probably accomplish that next week?
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think, as I indicated before, we want to be good partners in the community, and I think this might be a pretty good match. We're willing to take a look at it and see where it goes.
Great, that would be fantastic. Thanks a lot, really
Okay.
appreciate it.
Thanks for coming in.
You bet, thank you very much.
Yeah. We're done with that. Okay. So what did you think? If you were critiquing Galen, what do you think he did well? What stands out?
Introducing the other employers.
Yeah.
They can get firsthand.
Right. To have a reference from other employers. Yeah. That was a nice strategy on his part. They may not even call the other employers, but they know they can.
Yeah.
So it's there. Yeah. What else do you think Galen did well?
I think he emphasized that it needs to be a good match, and he didn't go, oh, I have 20 participants looking for a job. He
Yeah.
said, I have this one individual, and here's why they would be a good fit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like just that one. You know, it's interesting because with some employment approaches, they do kind of like build a relationship. I'm sorry, veterans have done this because people love to hire veterans. And, you know, so it was like, you know, Home Depot, and they go in, Home Depot says, we'll take 20 people. We'll take 20 of your veterans. You know, so, and that's not always the case, but, you know, that is kind of an approach. It's like, it's a market base then. It's not based upon each individual and making sure it's a good match. Anything else? You thought he did well? Yes.
I think he did very well in matching the skills that they were looking for, and that he would only be working part-time, that he is aware when he enters the job
Yeah.
that he will only be working part-time, and also the fact that he stressed, and then later on, you know, if you feel comfortable, or he feels comfortable, maybe it could grow.
Right. Yeah.
So that leaves a little bit of room for growth also for that person.
Right. Yeah, he really paid attention to what the employer said, right? So he used active listening, he paid close attention to what he said he wanted, and then he put it back on him, he said. And typically, he brought up this job candidate, and typically we'd say not to do that because that's the third cup of tea, but he was kind of pushed for this video. Typically, what I find is it's better to learn and go back to the person. So I would go back and talk to that man he was talking about, the 35-year-old, blah, 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 and say, this is what I learned. Are you still interested in that, in working there? Because I can't tell you how many times employment specialists go back and say, you know, I promoted you, I gave them your resume, aren't you excited? And they're like, I don't think I want to do that. And then you're left holding a bag. You know, it's kind of like, oops. And I got to go back and tell them I don't have a job candidate. So get permission from the person. Anything else? What would you give him feedback on? Maybe that he didn't do so well. Is there anything that stood out that you kind of went, I don't like that?
I think the main thing that stood out to me is that he said he had a match, and you have to be careful about saying that.
Yeah.
You really do.
Right.
Because if it doesn't work out, then you're not looking so good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we want to make sure we're referring people that are a good match, right? But you want to make sure the person's up for it. I think the other thing he brought up is that he had people on Social Security that only wanted to work part-time. I kind of thought, I don't know that I would do that. I mean, I just, yeah, and it's kind of like, you know, it helped to kind of prompt it forward for then the employer to say, I've been wondering about those people with mental illness, you know, what does that mean? And I think he did an excellent job of saying, is there something specific you want to know? Instead of like, I'm just going to dump you with a whole bunch of information that may not be relevant to anything. It's like, what in particular do you want to know? But I don't think I would just be going on about, you know, I work with people on Social Security benefits and, you know, because some people choose to work part-time regardless. Okay.
And some people don't want people to know that they're disabled.
Yeah. Yeah, people choose whether to disclose or not.
Yeah, I tell people it's better if you don't, unless you need a reasonable accommodation.
Yeah,
Because I don't care what anybody says, there's a lot of discrimination out
yeah, yeah. And typically what we would do with IPS, we have a whole document we have people go through because it's such an important discussion, disclosure is. But we just guide the process, but people have to make up their own mind.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say it's better for you to or it's better for you not to because it really depends on each individual and what they want to do. So anyway,
Question for you. So
yes.
that's when, is that an opportunity, say on the first day, I'm not sure if it's then or later, when we are telling that we work with people with disabilities, that's in the introduction, or later on we say in the beginning just we work with folks and generally speaking looking for jobs, and then that's the second job where I let them know I'm working with folks with disabilities too, in our own experience of disclosure, or sort of how does that play into it? Is that in the beginning? Does that come later?
Yeah.
In your timeline, would you say? Like, for example, right here I am, I'm saying, hi, I work with deaf and blind people as an employment specialist. Like, are they gonna just shut me out and close the door, send me
Yeah.
running kind of thing?
Yeah.
What kind of impact and when do you wanna have that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's always the question people ask. And typically with mental health, it's typically in the title of what you do. So I wouldn't say I work with people with disabilities because I'm not talking about disabilities. I'm talking about a worker. We're not talking about being in a mental health program. We're talking about a worker, an employee. And so I kind of keep the focus on the person as an employee, but I will say I work for a mental health agency. So if they have questions about that, I'm not hiding where I work. So
I've been told to use the term job seekers.
Yeah, I like job seekers. I like the term job seekers. It's kind of like, because I can't tell you, we do this online course, and so people write their statement, how often people will go in focused on people's disability instead of their abilities and strengths. And so they say to an employer something like, I work with people that have mental health challenges, who struggle to get and keep jobs. And I'm like, why would you say that?
Yeah.
Why would you say that to an employer? I mean, that's just like, who's going to want to work with you? So I mean, we're trying to paint a picture of the person we're working with, and a capable person and an employee. And a lot of times people try to stay away from it. They'll use other terms for their employment program. They'll say whatever employment services, so they try to not bring it up in the title. So this is just, are there any other questions before I move on? Okay, so these are just questions. This is kind of a funnel, and these are where questions start to get slowed down, right? It's like some are wide open questions, what makes a good employee here, those sorts of things. Then you can get to these questions about things that kind of narrow down the conversation. So 5 mistakes to avoid during the meeting with an employer. We already talked about some of these. So don't ask about job openings. Make sure not to be interrupting an employer when they're talking. Asking if the employer is open to hiring people with criminal histories. When I did this last week, the employment specialist asked that right out. He said, well, you hire people with felonies. And it was the most interesting thing, because she turned around and she looked at her coworker. I've never had this happen. She turned around and looked at her coworker, and he said, if they have a record that goes further back or something, are you willing to? And she turned around to her coworker and she said, how long ago was it that you were arrested and we hired you? And I thought, who would say calling your coworker out? I mean, I was just blown away. But anyway, typically we just don't want to go there, right? We're just, again, we'll wait. And we have a whole way of working with people that have legal histories. That you're going to build that relationship so that the employer gets to know you. And then you start introducing this and introducing the person so they can tell their story. Speaking at length about your program. This is selling them on what we do. We can go on and on and on about how wonderful we are and everything we do and all the sports we offer. And it's like, don't do that yet.
You said the 70-30 rule?
Yeah, that's right.
You want to be talking about their organization 70% of the time.
Exactly. Employers do 70% of the talking. That's the rule of thumb. So asking a lot of those open-ended questions. And Galen was really good at that. Neglecting to prepare for the meeting. So, it's okay to take some notes when you're at a meeting. I mean, you want to be making eye contact, but it's really okay to take some notes of things you're learning. There's a lot of information. So after the meeting, I don't know how often you do this, people that do employment, but write a thank you note. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I so enjoyed learning about your business. And take it to them. Hand deliver it. Every time you get your face in front of an employer, it helps. It's just like you're there again. It's like Greg coming back over and over. It just gives you another opportunity to put your face in front of the employer. Reflect on the stage of the relationship. So take time to think about, where are we at in this relationship right now? Are they warm? Are they open to working with me? And what should be the next step to keep things going? And plan for your next step. Okay. So if an employer seems like they might be interested, but it looks like they will not be hiring anytime soon, they still may be able to help you by introducing you to other employers. Right? So there are all kinds of ways as you're building that relationship to expand out from there. For example, they might introduce you to someone in their suppliers, and they'd be willing to participate in a steering committee meeting. or they might be willing to help a client with a mock interview. I love those. These steps can help further your relationship with the employer. So we had a program in Oregon, it was in Clackamas County, but they had an individual that did not work out at a job. And they went to the employer, because we always recommend get in there quickly. If somebody doesn't work out, get back in there quickly and say, what could I have done to make a difference? And so she went and did that, but then she said, would you consider joining our steering committee? And the employer said he would, which I thought took a lot of nerve since it didn't work out. But he joined the steering committee, and then he just fell in love with the program. So he started learning more and more about what they were doing, and he became one of the biggest advocates for the program for employers. So these are steps you take after meeting with the employer. You want to keep that relationship going. This isn't one and done. We find the best way to, we find the best outcomes come from employment staff that revisit employers. If the employer appears interested in meeting people from your program, now or even at a later time, they are expected to be hiring. Return to talk about the person who might be a good fit. So this is the idea of thinking about, okay, this is the best of best scenarios. So I've been thinking a lot about what you told me, Galen would be saying. These are the sorts of people you look for. John, I've had time to consider your need to find people who are avid readers, would enjoy working with customers. I believe I do know someone similar to the person you described. Would you like to hear a little bit about her? If you know the employer is not hiring, ask if they'd be open to allowing a candidate to visit the workplace to learn more about the type of position, a 30-minute visit to observe workers and ask questions. But I mean, that idea of going in and doing like informational interviewing and learning about the business, I've heard of employers, once they meet somebody face to face and they're like, wow, this person's like pretty amazing. It kind of dispels things. And so they'll be like, either they are hiring or they know somebody that is. So the third step, this is the third step in the relationship. So what we need to do is maintaining the relationship over time. And so what do you think you need to do in order to do that? How would you go about maintaining a relationship? Have you gone in?
If I got someone employed there, I'd probably use that time to check in and see how they're doing.
Yeah, so that's job supports, right? Yep, we want to do that for sure.
You can always send emails.
Okay, so stay in touch by email.
Yeah. And I always find that it's good to stop by on holidays.
Do you take a holiday card or anything, or?
Yeah, I usually take a holiday card, and sometimes I'll take a little thing of chocolates or something like that.
Yeah, people will do that. I had one employment team, and they had all their little, I don't know, I think they had magnets with their name on it, so they put that in. And she said, he'll have to think about me every time he sees that magnet that's going to be sitting there, so it's going to be there in front of him. So go ahead. There's lots of different ways to do that. So you want to stay in touch with them every 4 to 6 weeks if they seem like they're open to hiring. So it's a good idea to keep a list of employers that are interested in working with you. And so you're triggered to go back and see them. You don't want to annoy them to death, though, so you got to make sure we're not annoying them. But it really reinforces the notion that you're interested in a long-term relationship, that you're persistent, that you really are interested in their business. And I already said that. Keep the list and kind of figure out what you're going to do as next steps. It could even just be going back to check in, or if you read about them in the newspaper, some sort of award they've won or something they're doing well in the community, to go back and mention it. There we have it. You could share good news at this point about your program. We've helped to get 30 people jobs recently, or this year, or whatever it may be. Return to let the employer know that you're working with someone who's interested in whatever work. Ask for a tour of the business. I love tours of the business. Do any of you do that ever? When you're not doing job development? Yes? What was that?
Let's say worst case scenario, doesn't work out, or something happens with the employee where they get terminated.
Yeah.
How do you go back and, like, maybe they weren't a good fit, but you
Yeah.
want to continue on with a possible relationship with the employer? How would you kind of mend or smooth things over
Yeah,
with them?
yeah. So when I was a supervisor for 10 years with IPS, and I just remember I had this one employment specialist, and he had trouble with an employer, and it didn't work out. And he said, I think I'm going to just lay low and wait for it to blow over. And I was like, no, you're not. So you really have to, you hope you have that relationship, that if you're really going in there and you're working with somebody and you're providing job supports with disclosure, right? Because if they don't know you're involved, they don't know you're involved. It's just another employee that's gone. But if they know you and you have a relationship, then I just find if you get in there quickly and apologize and say, I'm so sorry this didn't work out. Is there something I could have done differently to support the person? That usually employers will say, you were there when I needed you, you checked in. You know, I have regular employees where this didn't work out. I mean, I've hired people off the street all the time, and not everybody stays. If you have somebody else, let me know. I can't tell you how often that happens if you've got somebody that's good and you really made an effort.
Employers are usually pretty forgiving.
Yeah,
They really are.
yeah. If they know you worked hard and you really, you have that relationship. I mean, I just over and over again, I've just seen where it's not the big deal everybody thinks it's going to be.
Yeah.
They really say, I've had other employees that relapsed before on the job, or, other things have come up. So it's not the first time.
Sometimes if they have a really good relationship with the employee, they'll ask them if it's possible to reach out
Yeah,
to the counselor or the case manager to see if there's something
yeah,
that can help them to continue, before the problem becomes bigger.
yeah. That's a really good point. So and for those that you were here last time, with IPS, it's an integrated approach. So the person's usually working with a mental health team, case managers, therapists, other people. So very often an employer will let them know, I see this happening, is there something, they're going to need help. And so they kind of sound the alert. And then, you can request a medical leave for people, or you can advocate for people to get a job back if they had to let them go. I mean, if they really were a good employee.
Or they put in a job coach.
Yeah,
To kind of help them.
yeah. And typically with mental health, it's interesting, a little different than the DDD population, is that we don't do a lot of job coaching. We can do it and we will do it. It's a part of the job description, but usually people don't need it. So the actual side-by-side working with somebody, there's not a whole lot of that. A lot of it's like behind the scenes, meeting with the supervisor to find out how things are going, a lot of like coaching around things that may have to do with confidence or maybe picking up productivity. Sometimes people work slowly, and so it's like, how can we optimize job performance for the person? So studying that sort of thing. I had worked with an employment specialist, and they got somebody a job in like a huge corporation where they had all the office dividers, and they had to deliver mail to different desks. And so it's like a mouse maze in there. There's so many corners. So he went in after 5 o'clock and they closed, and he put arrows down at the bottom of all the dividers so the person could look to know which way to turn. So I mean, those are the sorts of things you're going to find more within mental health.
If you have a good relationship with that employer also, I've had people call even a year later.
Yeah,
And say, we're having some problems with so-and-so. Can you maybe send in a job specialist to help us through it?
Yeah.
And I've even gotten phone calls where they say, so-and-so has, we've noticed a change in his behavior.
yeah,
And he's losing it, so we will meet you at the side door. Security is with him. Will you please take him to get some help? So I've
Yeah.
even had employers do that.
yeah, help us out. That's like when you back out and you're not actually on site or visiting with the employer as much anymore. So they've been working well for a while, and then something might go wrong. Yeah. Okay. think we're almost.
Yep.
So that's it. So any other questions that you have? Thoughts about this approach? Does it feel okay, or does it feel, I mean, how does it feel to you?
It always feels a little awkward.
Yeah, it's a little intimidating. Yes?
For a person, employment specialist, to be working with APS, what kind of caseload do you think is appropriate?
20.
20?
Yep, that's fidelity. So everything's kind of written out. So typically employment specialists will have caseloads of 20 or fewer. If you want to be well implemented, 25, you get a score of 4. So it keeps going down. If you had 30, it'd be a score of 3, so it drops down. But we really believe with having time to visit with lots of employers and build relationships, the team meetings they go to, meeting out in the community, there's 65% of their time is supposed to be in the community, which is 27 hours a week. Because community time, we find, is really helps with getting people jobs, spending time in the community. So all those things are kind of in that fidelity.
I'm in the area of housing now, and I know that I tell my folks that I'm working with, you need to dress like you're going for a job interview, and you need to go face to face, that way they remember who you are.
Yeah?
So,
Yep.
it's the same way with housing.
Yeah. You're going to say something, Teresa?
Yeah, one question that Haley and I had trying to implement was how to maintain relationships with employers if, right now we have a small caseload and,
Yeah.
well, we probably won't end up placing anyone there.
Yeah.
Because she's spread out across the state too.
Yeah.
So we were wondering.
It's challenging.
Yeah.
When you have a small caseload, that's really hard because you only have so many people. I mean, I kind of started with, when I work with programs, of just even introducing, we're a newer program, we're getting started, but I'm currently out meeting employers so I can learn about your business in case I had anybody that matched what you wanted. But at some point, if you don't, I mean, you could go back occasionally, but you don't want to keep going and going and going without anybody at all. But yeah, I mean, and making sure that you're going to employers that match what people want to do too. So it's kind of like really looking back at like, what are people's preferences, their skills, their interests.
So if you guys could give it up for Sandy for presenting.
Thank you.